In today's episode, we're examining 3 deadly pet attacks that ended in tragedy, from a delivery driver's fatal encounter with an escaped tiger to a Florida reptile breeder's deadly miscalculation with a massive python. But first, we start in the rural outskirts of Kalispell, where years of familiarity and overconfidence created the perfect conditions for a hungry predator to turn on its owner. It was August 11th, 2017, in the rural residential outskirts of Kalispell, Montana, where sprawling properties and dense tree lines provided perfect privacy for unconventional pursuits. 44-year-old Daxley Vorn had carved out his independence on these quiet acres, running a small engine repair business from his property. The self-employed mechanic was known for his confident demeanor and dismissive attitude toward conventional safety standards. Behind his modest home stood an outdoor steel panel enclosure with a chain-link roof, housing Vorn's most dangerous possession, an adult male grizzly bear he had acquired illegally as a young bear without professional licensing. The enclosure's single swinging gate was secured by a rusted, slightly bent latch bracket. Rather than replace the failing hardware, Vorn had installed a temporary bolt as a quick fix, reflecting his careless approach to maintenance. The bear's daily routine revolved around a 5 p.m. feeding schedule that Vorn religiously maintained. On this afternoon, however, an unexpected family medical emergency forced him to leave his property at 1:30 p.m. Hospital visits and traffic delays stretched on, and the bear went more than 12 hours past its normal feeding time, growing increasingly agitated. Adding to the animal's distress, neighbors 2 houses away hosted an afternoon barbecue, with strong cooked meat aromas drifting across the properties on the warm summer breeze, reaching the hungry bear's sensitive nostrils and intensifying its frustration. Grizzly bears are apex predators significantly more dangerous than their black bear cousins. Adult males typically weigh between 400 to 790 pounds and possess devastating strength, capable of breaking down doors and bending metal with their powerful limbs. Grizzlies possess one of the most powerful olfactory systems in the animal kingdom, capable of detecting food sources miles away, making barbecue aromas an unbearable provocation. When stressed by disrupted routines, unfamiliar stimuli, and territorial confusion, these already powerful animals become highly unpredictable and defensive. Their bite force is immense, capable of crushing large bones with ease, and their claws can grow up to 4 inches long. As late afternoon heat intensified the drifting food smells, the bear began repeatedly pacing the enclosure's perimeter, its massive shoulder pressed against the gate with increasing force, testing the rusted latch bracket's integrity. The temporary bolt, never designed for such persistent pressure, began twisting inside the weakened metal housing. With each push, the bracket deformed further until finally the bolt pulled completely free, allowing the gate to swing open. The liberated bear immediately moved toward the neighboring homes, drawn by the intoxicating scent of grilled meat. The animal's gait was purposeful and determined, powerful legs propelling its massive frame across the property boundary with surprising speed. Dried grass and twigs snapped beneath its weight as it navigated the unfamiliar terrain, nostrils flaring to track the aromatic trail that promised relief from its gnawing hunger. It entered the front yard, where adults had gathered near barbecue grills, causing immediate panic. People shouted and scattered as emergency calls flooded dispatch centers. The confused animal sniffed the ground and air near parked vehicles, searching for the aromatic source. Daxley Vorn arrived at this chaotic scene and parked roadside. Several neighbors watched from safe distances as he exited his vehicle and walked directly toward the bear. Raising his arms and calling out, Vorn attempted to regain control using his usual confident approach. However, this bear was agitated, overstimulated by surrounding noise and unfamiliar environment, no longer confined to its familiar enclosure. The animal vocalized and swayed its massive head in warning, displaying classic defensive aggression. But Vorn continued closing the distance, violating the bear's expanding stress threshold. When he stepped forward again, the grizzly perceived him as a direct threat in already overwhelming circumstances. It charged with explosive speed, covering remaining ground in seconds. The bear slammed into Vorn's chest with tremendous force, sending him crashing backward onto pavement. The impact alone cracked several ribs as the animal's full weight drove him into unforgiving asphalt. Before he could recover, the massive predator pinned him with powerful forepaws, each capable of delivering bone-shattering blows. The bear's first bite targeted his left shoulder, razor-sharp canines penetrating deep into muscle and connective tissue like daggers through fabric. The animal clamped down with devastating force, pressure powerful enough to shatter bone. It shook its head violently from side to side, motion designed by evolution to disable threats. Vorn's shoulder blade cracked audibly as tendons and ligaments tore like wet rope. Vorn's screams and struggles only reinforced the bear's perception of threat. The grizzly repositioned, driven by defensive rage rather than predatory instinct. Its next bite targeted Vorn's neck side, puncturing soft tissue and crushing his windpipe. The taste of blood and continued resistance triggered escalating aggression. It bit down on his upper chest, teeth scraping against ribs as it sought to neutralize what it perceived as danger. The bear's massive paws pressed down on Vorn's torso with such force that remaining intact ribs began cracking under pressure. Blood frothed from his mouth as internal injuries mounted. The animal delivered a devastating bite to his jawline, completely destroying bone structure. Fragments of shattered teeth and bone scattered across the pavement. When the bear repositioned again, its canines tore into the side of his neck, rupturing major blood vessels and triggering catastrophic bleeding. Vorn's body convulsed as consciousness faded within 30 seconds of the vessel rupture, then fell completely still as blood loss reached critical levels. The bear continued its assault even after movement ceased, delivering multiple crushing bites to his face and upper torso in a defensive frenzy, determined to eliminate what it perceived as a threat. The incident sparked immediate investigation by local wildlife authorities and law enforcement. Authorities launched a comprehensive review of illegal wildlife keeping in the area. The bear was located within hours and euthanized due to public safety concerns, despite protests from animal rights groups who argued the animal was acting on natural defensive instincts after improper containment. Investigators examined whether other household members had knowledge of the illegal keeping operation. Vorn's wife released a statement expressing devastation over the loss while acknowledging the risks they had ignored. Neighbors who had previously complained about the enclosure to local authorities, only to be told enforcement resources were limited, expressed relief that the long-standing safety concern had been addressed, though they mourned the tragic circumstances. The case fueled renewed legislative efforts and strengthened enforcement of existing dangerous wildlife statutes in rural Montana counties. Local officials implemented mandatory inspections for any reported dangerous animal keeping, with severe penalties for violations. The incident became a cautionary tale shared in wildlife management courses across the region. Emergency responders who witnessed the scene described it as one of the most brutal animal attacks they had ever encountered. The coroner's report detailed the extensive trauma, noting that Vorn had sustained over 24 distinct bite wounds across his body, consistent with a prolonged defensive mauling. Local media coverage sparked nationwide debate about private ownership of dangerous wildlife, with experts calling for federal regulations. Wildlife biologists who analyzed the incident noted that the bear's behavior was entirely predictable given the circumstances. A starved, stressed apex predator suddenly freed from confinement and overwhelmed by sensory stimulation. They emphasized that grizzlies, unlike domesticated animals, never truly lose their wild instincts regardless of years in captivity. The combination of hunger, territorial displacement, and perceived threat created what experts called a perfect storm of aggression. Some specialists used the case in training materials to demonstrate how even experienced handlers can fatally misjudge an animal's state of mind when environmental stressors accumulate beyond critical thresholds. Daxley Vorn's story was a heartbreaking reminder of how quickly a stressed animal can turn deadly when territorial confusion and environmental chaos override familiar conditioning. For Keela Brunt, it wasn't a bear she had raised from a cub that would prove fatal, but an exotic predator lurking behind a compromised fence during what should have been a routine delivery in suburban El Paso County. It was May 6, 2016, in a quiet suburban neighborhood of El Paso County, Colorado, where manicured lawns and white picket fences created an illusion of safety that would be shattered in minutes. 28-year-old Keela Brunt had built her small meal prep delivery business around efficiency and shortcuts, traits that served her well in the competitive food service industry. The practical young woman was known for her routine-driven approach and her ability to navigate residential areas with speed that impressed her clients. Keela's delivery route that afternoon included several stops in this particular neighborhood, where houses sat close together with narrow side yards connecting front and back properties. She had discovered that cutting between certain houses could save precious minutes on her tight schedule, a practice that had become second nature over months of deliveries. Her clients appreciated her punctuality, often leaving glowing reviews about her reliability and the still warm meals she delivered. This reputation had become her livelihood, making every saved minute translate directly into customer satisfaction and repeat business. The homeowner at one address had been keeping a dangerous secret behind his modest ranch-style home, an adult Bengal tiger housed in a makeshift backyard enclosure. The enclosure consisted of chain-link panels and wooden support posts, a structure never designed to contain one of nature's most powerful predators. Recent heavy rains had caused significant soil erosion along the fence line, washing away earth beneath the barrier and creating a depression several inches deep. The homeowner had attempted repairs by stacking concrete blocks along the base, but gaps remained where the original foundation had been compromised. Neighbors had reported hearing unusual roaring sounds late at night, but the homeowner dismissed inquiries, claiming he was playing nature documentaries at high volume. The tiger's enclosure lacked proper reinforcement, veterinary oversight, or adequate space for an animal of its size. Warning signs were absent, and the property had no perimeter fencing to prevent accidental encounters. The tiger, fed only once daily in early evening, had not yet received its meal and was becoming increasingly focused on potential food sources as afternoon shadows lengthened. Bengal tigers are among the largest and most powerful cats on Earth, with adult males weighing up to 660 pounds and measuring over 9 feet in length. Their canine teeth measure up to 4 inches, designed to penetrate deep and deliver crushing pressure to the throat. These apex predators maintain their hunting instincts regardless of captivity, with their predatory responses always present and ready to activate. Their acute senses make them hyper-aware of movement and potential prey in their territory. As Keela approached the narrow side yard between two houses, carrying her insulated delivery bag, the tiger began pacing inside its compromised enclosure. The animal's acute hearing had detected her footsteps, and its predatory instincts immediately activated. The tiger approached the eroded section of fence, lowering its massive head to investigate the gap beneath the barrier. Using its powerful forepaws, it excavated the loose soil with rapid movements, widening the breach. Within minutes, the gap was large enough for the predator to force its head and shoulders underneath, compressing its muscular frame to squeeze through. Keela continued walking along the narrow pathway, unaware of the deadly predator now free behind her. The sound of disturbed gravel finally caught her attention, and she turned to investigate the source of the noise. In that instant, she found herself face to face with the tiger in a confined space, with no avenue for escape. The tiger's predatory response was immediate. It lunged forward with explosive power, covering the distance in a single bound. The massive cat struck Keela in the torso with tremendous force, its 400-pound frame driving her to the ground. Several ribs were fractured from the impact as she hit the hard-packed earth. The tiger pinned her beneath its massive forepaws, each equipped with razor-sharp claws. Its first bite targeted her shoulder and upper back, the 4-inch canines penetrating deep into muscle and tissue. The jaws clamped down with immense pressure, puncturing through to bone. The predator began the characteristic head-shaking motion that tigers use to control their prey, violently thrashing Keela's upper body from side to side. The force tore through muscle tissue and created massive trauma, while blood poured from the deep puncture wounds. The tiger maintained its grip, preventing any possibility of escape. The animal then repositioned to deliver its killing bite, targeting Keela's throat with the precision honed by millions of years of evolution. The massive canines penetrated the soft tissue of her neck, compressing her airway as the tiger's powerful jaws closed around her throat. The crushing pressure collapsed her trachea, cutting off her oxygen supply completely. The tiger held this suffocating grip with unwavering determination, its jaws locked in place as Keela's body struggled against the inevitable. Blood filled her damaged airways, while the constriction prevented any air from reaching her lungs. The massive predator maintained its death hold, using its body weight to keep her immobilized against the ground. Consciousness began to fade as oxygen deprivation took its toll. Her movements weakened, then stilled as her brain was deprived of the oxygen it desperately needed. The tiger's grip had severed blood vessels in her neck, contributing to the rapid blood loss, but it was the prolonged compression and suffocation that proved fatal. After maintaining pressure on her throat for nearly 3 minutes, Keela's cardiovascular system began to fail. Her heart, starved of oxygen and struggling against massive blood loss, ceased its rhythmic beating. The tiger maintained its grip for several more moments, instinctively ensuring its prey was completely neutralized before releasing its hold. Only when all movement had ceased did the tiger release her motionless form. Following its predatory instincts, the animal began dragging the body toward a shaded corner of the yard, seeking to secure its kill away from potential competitors. The fatal encounter, from initial contact to complete stillness, had lasted approximately 5 minutes. The incident triggered an immediate multi-agency investigation involving local police, state wildlife officers, animal control, and later federal authorities. The illegal keeping of exotic animals in residential areas became a focal point of the inquiry, with officials discovering that the homeowner lacked any permits or safety protocols for housing such a dangerous predator. The homeowner initially claimed the animal was a large dog, but this false claim quickly unraveled when authorities arrived on scene. The tiger was contained and later euthanized. Keela's family filed wrongful death lawsuits against both the homeowner and local authorities, arguing that previous complaints about unusual animal sounds had been ignored. The case sparked outrage in the community, with residents demanding stricter oversight of exotic animal ownership and better enforcement of existing regulations. Her mother became a vocal advocate for exotic animal legislation, testifying before state committees about the devastating impact of unregulated wildlife ownership. The tragedy prompted Colorado to strengthen its laws governing private ownership of dangerous wildlife, implementing mandatory registration and inspection requirements. Local authorities established a hotline for reporting suspected illegal animal keeping, while emergency responders received specialized training for exotic animal incidents. The state also created a database of known exotic animal owners to prevent similar tragedies. The homeowner faced multiple felony charges, including involuntary manslaughter and illegal wildlife possession. The case became a widely cited case in discussions about criminal liability for exotic animal owners. Animal welfare organizations used Keela's story to advocate for federal legislation banning private ownership of big cats. The incident also led to neighborhood watch programs specifically focused on identifying illegal exotic animals in residential areas. While Keela Brunt's death highlighted the hidden dangers lurking behind suburban fences, for Rickson Quaid, the threat came from a creature he thought he understood completely, a massive python that had shared his garage for years until one evening when confidence met constriction in the most deadly way possible. It was October 19, 2018, in a residential home in Seminole County, Florida, where the humid evening air hung heavy with the promise of another tropical storm. 33-year-old Rickson Quaid had converted his spacious 2-car garage into a reptile sanctuary, housing an impressive collection of snakes that had become both his passion and his small-scale breeding business. The confident herpetologist was known among local reptile enthusiasts for his hands-on approach and his dismissive attitude toward conventional safety protocols. Rickson's garage was lined with custom-built glass front enclosures, each carefully climate-controlled to house different species of exotic serpents. His pride and joy was a magnificent reticulated python, measuring approximately 14 feet in length and weighing well over 120 pounds. The massive constrictor had been fed 5 days earlier, following Rixon's established feeding schedule. The python's enclosure was secured by a single manual latch system that had developed a troubling habit of not seating properly. Friends and fellow reptile keepers had repeatedly advised Rixon to implement a two-person handling protocol for his larger snakes, warnings he consistently dismissed with the confidence of someone who had never experienced a serious incident. Reticulated pythons are among the world's longest snakes, with some specimens exceeding 30 feet in length. These powerful constrictors are native to Southeast Asia and are known for being highly reactive and prone to strong feeding responses. Their muscular bodies can generate crushing pressure that rapidly cuts off blood circulation, causing cardiovascular collapse and cardiac arrest within minutes. These serpents are ambush predators, capable of striking with lightning speed and wrapping their prey in deadly coils before the victim can react. Their backward curved teeth are designed to grip and hold struggling prey, while their powerful muscles do the killing work. As Rixon approached the python's enclosure that evening, the massive serpent was already alert and active near the front glass. Rixon opened the enclosure door, unaware that the latch had failed to seat properly during his previous maintenance session. The python immediately began moving toward the opening. Rixon reached inside to remove the water bowl for cleaning, a routine task he had performed countless times before. However, this time his movement triggered the snake's powerful feeding response. 5 days post-feeding was precisely when the animal's hunting instincts would be most acute. The python's head shot forward with explosive speed, its jaws clamping onto Rixon's wrist with dozens of needle-sharp teeth. The sudden pain caused him to jerk his arm backward instinctively, but the snake's grip only tightened. In one fluid motion, the python released its bite and began coiling around his forearm, its powerful muscles contracting with relentless pressure. The snake's body continued wrapping around Rixon's upper arm, each coil adding exponentially to the crushing force being applied. He attempted to unwind the coils with his free hand, but the python's strength was overwhelming. The constriction spread to his chest and shoulders as more of the snake's 14-foot length joined the deadly embrace. Rixon fell backward onto the concrete garage floor, the python's weight and momentum driving him down hard. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs just as the snake added additional loops around his torso. One coil slid up around his neck, immediately restricting blood flow to his brain and compressing his airway. Each time Rixon exhaled, the snake tightened its grip, preventing him from drawing another full breath. His chest expansion became increasingly restricted as the coils compressed his rib cage. The pressure around his neck intensified, cutting off both his carotid arteries and jugular veins simultaneously. Blood flow to his brain decreased rapidly, causing his vision to blur and his coordination to fail. The snake's muscular coils continued tightening with each of his heartbeats, creating a feedback loop of increasing pressure that rapidly compromised his cardiovascular system. Rixon's breathing became shallow and labored as his diaphragm struggled against the constricting coils. His face began turning blue from oxygen deprivation as restricted venous return caused his cardiovascular system to collapse. Within 2 minutes, the combination of restricted blood circulation and compromised breathing caused Rixon to lose consciousness. His body went limp, but the python continued constricting for several more minutes, ensuring its perceived threat was completely neutralized. Only after maintaining the constriction for nearly 10 minutes total did the python gradually begin to loosen its coils. The massive serpent slowly unwound itself from Rixon's motionless body. The entire attack had lasted less than 15 minutes from start to finish. The python's body remained coiled loosely around Rixon's lifeless form for nearly 20 minutes after the attack concluded, its tongue flicking repeatedly, tasting the air for signs of movement or threat. When Rixon failed to return inside after his usual 30-minute garage routine, his wife initially assumed he had become absorbed in observing his collection. However, as the evening stretched past the hour mark, a growing sense of unease prompted her to check on him. She opened the door connecting the house to the garage and called his name into the dimly lit space. The scene that greeted her was incomprehensible at first. Her husband's motionless body on the concrete floor, the the massive python partially draped across him. Her screams pierced the humid night air as she frantically dialed 911, her hands trembling so violently she could barely hold the phone. Emergency dispatchers kept her on the line while simultaneously alerting both paramedics and animal control specialists trained in handling dangerous reptile situations. First responders arrived within 8 minutes, but the experienced paramedics immediately recognized that Rickson had been deceased for some time. The python had retreated partially back into its enclosure, but remained agitated by the commotion. Animal control officers used specialized equipment to safely secure the snake before medical personnel could approach the body, a process that consumed another tense 15 minutes. The medical examiner's subsequent autopsy revealed the devastating efficiency of the python's attack. Rickson had suffered multiple rib fractures from the constricting pressure, severe bruising across his entire torso, and catastrophic damage to the soft tissues of his neck. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation combined with cardiac arrest induced by the massive constriction trauma. Investigators documented the faulty latch mechanism and noted the complete absence of emergency protocols or safety equipment in the garage. There were no snake hooks, no restraint devices, no emergency release tools, and no communication system that would have allowed Rickson to call for help during the attack. His cell phone was found on a workbench across the garage, completely out of reach from where the attack occurred. The reticulated python was not destroyed. Florida wildlife officials determined that the snake had acted purely on instinct, without malicious intent. The animal was eventually relocated to a licensed reptile sanctuary with proper facilities and trained staff. The remaining snakes in Rickson's collection were distributed among licensed facilities and experienced handlers. Rickson's family struggled to comprehend how their experienced reptile handler had fallen victim to an animal he had cared for successfully for years. His death sent shockwaves through the herpetological community, sparking intense debates about solo handling of large constrictors and the need for mandatory safety protocols. Fellow breeders who had worked alongside Rickson expressed profound grief mixed with frustration, knowing that his death could have been prevented with proper precautions. The tragedy led industry groups to adopt stricter safety standards, and insurers began requiring two-person handling for large constrictors. Reptile organizations implemented more comprehensive certification programs, while exotic animal breeders faced additional safety requirements. The case became a sobering reminder that experience alone cannot overcome the fundamental dangers of working with apex predators. His wife later established a foundation dedicated to reptile safety education, ensuring that Rickson's tragic death would serve as a lasting warning to future generations of herpetologists about the critical importance of proper safety protocols. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.